Hello and welcome. The pandemic has been increasingly unkind to India's salaried workforce. The Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, or CMIE, has said that the number of salaried people losing their jobs amid the coronavirus pandemic has now surged to 18.9, or almost 19 million people. Now, about 5 million jobs were lost in the month of July alone. So the rate of change is seemingly quite dramatic. On the other hand, the number of non-salaried informal jobs has actually increased and improved over time. Just to put things in context, in the month of April, about 121 million jobs were lost. That figure is now down to 11 million. The difference, if you were to look at the figure for employed individuals, is unusual, but that's because about 15 million jobs have been added in the farm sector alone. To understand what's happening and why is this happening, I'm now joined by CMIE's Managing Director, Mahesh Vyas. Mahesh, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So Mahesh, what is all of this telling you? So we're looking at figures going up and down. We are seeing additions, deletions. So tell us how you now look at these figures as you look back over the last 4 months.
So with the benefit of having seen this play out from April till now, we can kind of get the story in some sense. That what happened in April was there's an immediate impact of a massive shock to the economy, which led to employment of around 403 million people who had employment get hit. And of those 403 million people, 121 million lost their jobs. That is a huge hit. Now, it's easier for us to appreciate this after seeing the structure of employment in India. Most of the employment in India is in informal jobs. They are daily wage earners, they are agricultural laborers, they are small shopkeepers, small business people, and farmers, of course. It is easy for them. There's a lot of mobility in these people that when there's a shock, they immediately lose their jobs. So there could be a person, maybe a carpenter or a mason, etc., working at a construction site. Once the lockdown came in, there was no masonry to do, there was no carpentry to do, there was nothing on play at all. They lost their jobs immediately. The salaried people don't lose these jobs so immediately. People like you and me are working for, say, established companies, and even if that company is in trouble, our job is retained for some time. It takes some time before the jobs get lost. So what we are seeing is that after the lockdown was lifted, all those informal job holders got their jobs back. Those masons saw some construction work begin again. They went back to the construction sites and they are working back over there. Farmers have seen agricultural, the rains to be very good. They're going and doing sowing work. They're doing farm activities. Things are back to normal over there. Salaried people are getting hit with a lag. Companies are slowly shutting down as they're slowly seeing the impact of the lockdown to be more severe than what they anticipated earlier. Mind you, the lockdown has been a lot more prolonged than what anyone imagined in the beginning. So the impact played it out kind of slowly, the slow poison creeping up with the organized sector, and salaried people are losing their jobs and they will find it a lot more difficult to get them back.
So what we thought was resilience in corporate India or the organized sector was not. Is that what you're saying?
Less resilience than what we thought. It was surprising to see the corporate sector or salary jobs not getting hit as much as it did. But I think I would not use the word resilience. It is that they took a lot, mind you, they lost 17 million jobs and 121 million jobs were lost. So it's not that they did not lose out. The only sector that did show resilience into quotes is farming sector, which never lost jobs. And that's because farm sector is like your residual camp. If you don't get anything anywhere, you go back home to your villages and you have some mud to shovel around and you say you're employed in your farm over there. So that's the only sector that showed resilience. But I think the rest of us suffered. The corporate sector is seeing the impact playing out a little more slowly. So they did take a hit, 17 million jobs, has gone up to 19 million jobs now, can get worse. So I think the hit of the corporate sector is playing out slowly.
And is there anything to say that the ability of the corporate sector to bounce back is less or more compared to the informal sector? I mean, apart from maybe what the more obvious reasons are,
I
and
think
jobs.
I think the corporate sector is going to have two kinds of reactions. There is certainly going to be a market shift. When you have a shock of this kind, and this is the third shock in 4 years, only the large companies are going to survive. So the first thing is small and medium companies will find it difficult to survive. They will shut down. And as they shut down, they will yield space to the larger companies. The larger companies will see their market share increase. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. The second thing is that the large corporate sector, which is going to gain market share, is not necessarily going to absorb the labor. They will go into more automation because they are more capable of going into automation.
Right.
So the larger companies will gain market share, will rely less on labor, and the small and medium companies will wind up. So this is the difficult story which will play itself out for salaried employees going forward.
So to that extent, some of this, and I'm sure you're visualizing maybe some sectors or companies, is irreversible. Is that correct?
That's right. Some sectors, some companies, it is irreversible. It is very clear that small and medium companies are not going to survive this. So the entrepreneurs which are running small and medium companies, particularly the smaller and medium-sized companies, are going to find some other jobs in the new layout that there is. So they will have to find different place to work on, and they can shut down some operations, start some new operation, but the net gain is going to be negative for them. So that is clearly going to be a problem, resilience on the top and a complete reworking out at the lower end of the spectrum.
Right. So now if we look at the 19 million salaried who lost jobs versus others, including in the farming sector, who gained, I guess it's logical that the consumption or purchasing power of this 19 million is higher. But are you able to quantify that and its impact on the economy?
So that is a more debilitating story. It's very troublesome because whether you have lost your job or you have not lost your job, even if you have retained your job, your incomes are down. So very likely, even the places where jobs have been retained, I think the wage increases will either be very low or negligible, or it will be a small pay cut. So I think income losses are there. Even if you've got income, let us say from your wages stable, you will have lost somewhere else. Some valuations have gone down. Your basic sentiment has gone down. So I think in terms of purchasing power, we have seen a much bigger loss than the loss we are seeing in jobs. So job losses are less than income losses.
But what would be the impact on the economy? For instance, suppose, let's say we've seen figures saying there have been a 10% contraction in GDP or likely contraction. So, and I'm sure this contributes to that. But what is the loss in consumption power or purchasing power in the economy because of these loss of jobs? Is there a way to quantify that?
We can quantify this much better in the middle of September, when we will get some additional data on income. The employment data comes in with a small lag, but the income data comes with a much bigger lag. It's a 4-month lag. So the first month of the pandemic, which was April, we will get data for April in September. In the second week of September itself, we will be able to talk about what is the most damaging impact in terms of income in the worst affected month. So let's wait for September to come. Right now, we only conjecture based on responses which ask a person whether the income had declined or not. And that decline is uniform across the board.
Right, and to your point, I think it's the decline, it's a decline, it's the loss, as well as the obviously the loss in propensity to buy. So if you were to now look at the informal sector, how would you look at their purchasing power now that they've come back into the workforce and have expanded in a way? Would their purchasing power also be back to what it was pre-COVID, or is there uncertainty there as well?
Very unlikely. I don't think their purchasing power has increased or even remained where it was earlier. Mind you, people in the informal sector, in a sense, cannot afford to remain unemployed. salaried employees, people who have been in the job for some time, do have some savings to fall back on and can afford to stay unemployed for, let us say, 2 or 3 months, maybe even more than that. But a person who's on daily wage, as a daily wage laborer, he has to earn today to get his meals today evening. So it's hand to mouth almost. And if he doesn't get that, he has to borrow or do something equivalent to that. So I think it's a lot more difficult. So these people are going back to work no matter what are the wages that they be getting. They could be working for half the number of hours they were working earlier and at half the wages. So they could be taking a hit both on the number of hours worked and the wage rate. So they have gone back to work because of compulsions of having to go back to work. I don't think they're going to contribute to greater purchasing power.
Right. And last question, Mahesh. So, we saw a lot of migration, people going to the villages, and we're also now seeing those people, some of them at least, coming back to jobs in the cities. Are you able to get a composite sense at this point on where this stands? I mean, how many people have come back? What is the loss or gain in employment, particularly for this class of migrant workers?
Unfortunately, I don't have good numbers on that. So we have been trying to fix this problem to be able to understand migrants. Our whole survey is regarding households, which are stable structures. But if the migrants are mostly living in, say, construction sites, or let us say behind the restaurant in which they are working or behind the shops in which they are working, then they don't count as households in the traditional sense of the term, and they don't get counted. So we are trying to fix this problem, but I think it will take a few months before we'll be able to get a handle on what's happening to the migrants.
Right. Okay. One more last question, Mahesh. So, earlier I'd asked you about, what could be the kind of support the government could give. And I think you had hazarded a figure of 10,000 rupees per month for these 120 million families for 2 months. What's your sense now? I mean, is it too late to do something like that? If so, what should we be doing?
It's never too late. There is still pain around. I would say hand out these monies to these people. Not just the 11 million jobs left now, but to much more, go back to the 121 million people who had lost their jobs because they've all seen a big hit in their livelihood. Very likely all of them are more indebted today than they will be able to service. So they will lose assets and they can lose a lot more. So I think to save the stress that's going to come up next, it could be mental stress. It could be asset losses. It could be losses in education and health. There are many losses that we can't even measure. So I think it's important to step in and not let that happen.
Right. Mahesh Vyas, thank you so much for joining me and as always sharing your thoughts and insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.